So check it out.
To what I opened the show with, more war on terror, that shows no signs of waning. We've got the Secretary of Defense telling 60 Minutes that they will not show any evidence and the public will just have to believe the administration when they label someone a terrorist and execute them without any due process. So, all that we can get from Panetta's answer here is that the evidence doesn't matter, due process in a courtroom to prove that evidence doesn't matter. If the government calls you a terrorist, they can kill you, and the rest of us are just supposed to take their word for it.
The U.S. government now laying out its legal argument for killing American citizens overseas without a trial. But what about targeting people on U.S. soil?
Does that only apply to U.S. citizen that's overseas, or does that apply to U.S. citizen that's here?
I'd have to go back. I'm not certain whether that was addressed or not.
So that we have clarity here, he is not certain whether it was addressed, whether our government can kill our own people inside our own country.
Are you slightly uncomfortable with the idea that the United States president, whoever it may be, can decide that this or that U.S. citizen living abroad is a threat to national security and kill them?
International war on terror that's going on now, we're going to have to make sure that we have the tools to get some of these people who are very bad and comply with American law.
And do you think that the...
Okay, I got a question. Who is the person who decided who is very bad? The person who decided that just being black was bad and you were, because of those conditions of your skin complexion, ordained by constitutional law that never was implemented, but it sure was enforced, to be property enslaved and mistreated and all the brutal things that happened only because someone constituted the concept of what he just said, someone being a bad guy. So you can just be a bad guy just because someone says you that. And that is what they're talking about right now. All they have to do is say you are a bad guy. And the bad guy is a word that is mean bad guys, but it is disguised as terrorist. But you don't have to do an act of terrorism like the United States does, like dropping bombs on people and building concentration camps and enslaving people and all the stuff they've done. And then he sits his ass there and has the nerves to, without any conviction of self-guilt, say someone else could be a bad guy. Okay, let's see what else they have to say.
The president should be able to make that decision in conjunction with the folks in the administration, without going to a court, without going to you all, anything.
There is a war going on. There's no question about that. He's the commander-in-chief, and there have been guidelines set, and if he follows those, I think he should be able to do it.
Just so I understand it correctly, are you really saying that in certain situations, the president can decide whether it's in the best interest of the nation and then do something illegal?
I'm saying that when the president does it, that means it's not illegal.
This federal government, this administration says it can kill Americans when they're riding with their children in a car in a desert.
That is quite a horrifying reality of how our government functions these days, of how completely out of hand this war on terror has become.
So we can kill you anywhere, and we don't have to ask a damn soul about it. So Eric Holder said, okay, you know what, we've been getting a lot of flack for that. I'm going to go to Northwestern, I'm going to clear this thing up. And he did. He gave a speech where he explained that there are no rules.
Some have argued that the president is required to get permission from a federal court before taking action against a United States citizen. This is simply not accurate. Due process and judicial process are not one and the same, particularly when it comes to national security. The Constitution guarantees due process. It does not guarantee judicial process.
And now a new interpretation of the Constitution where due process is a bunch of guys in the executive branch getting together saying, should we kill somebody? Yeah, let's go ahead and kill him.
But the thing that makes it critical here is that the U.S. government unilaterally, without any proof, without any due process at all, is actually pointing the finger and saying, you, my friend, are a terrorist. So the question then becomes, if they get to decide, what makes you question whether or not they can decide that it's you, or it's me, or it's my neighbor, or my father, or my son?
The Constitution says to the contrary. The Constitution says if the government wants your life, or your liberty, or your property, it has to articulate to a jury what law you have violated and prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt to that jury. It's called due process. Without due process, the government could take anything it wanted and kill anybody it wanted.
Well, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, along with the U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement Office, have placed a large and rather interesting order. They've ordered 450 million rounds of ammunition to be made and delivered to them over the next 5 years. All right, so this is interesting because this is not the Pentagon making the order for the military. It's DHS and ICE. And to give you a little perspective here, there are only about 311...
Okay, now, I want to say something on that order of 450 million bullets. Okay, let's say that you had a 1 million man army. If you had an army with 1 million men in it, do you know every soldier in that army would have to successfully kill 45 people in order for each one of those bullets be able to be accountable for? Which, to make a long story short, okay, that's just too many bullets. Those type of bullets were purchased during World War I and probably World War II without no record of it being written down or anything. You could manufacture a country like America with Great Britain back up and all the other European countries that make bullets would have simply cut all those bullets if they were planning on using that many bullets without saying anything to anyone. Yeah, I mean, think about it. That is a dumbass way to rid the world of its population. That is just too much work. These people will not work that hard. What they will probably do, see, what I'm getting at is that there's no need for anyone to plan on mass murder where you have to shoot that many rounds of bullets. That many rounds of bullets could only be used as some type of propaganda ploy to give somebody a full notion of concept. That many bullets purchased in real actuality would be kept a secret, because that would definitely let people know that you are getting ready to commit mass murder or either start a war or something. Well, this is what we're saying. They say 450 of 40 caliber rounds of bullets. Well, I tell you what, that's going to be a whole lot of organizing of every soldier getting 40 caliber weapons and all this stuff that's going to have to go on. It's just like, could be true, but I just wanted to throw that in there for someone to think about. Some things to me just doesn't add up. I mean, it doesn't. The government is very, very secretive about things like that, and they're very wise. They would not purposely kill 450 million people by shooting them. We already know that because we've seen their methods in World War II. So I just wanted to share that for no particular reason at all, not to make you don't believe this, but just a thought I had, okay? That's all.
Million people living in the entire country. So it begs the question, why such a massive order, 450 million bullets?
DHS, Department of Homeland Security, consists of the TSA, the Transportation Security Administration, and Immigration Services. This is a domestic law enforcement agency. And to be fair, some people online who don't want to believe what's going on have said that this is just going to be used for target practice, or also it could be that the government is simply stockpiling ammunition because they don't want to get into a situation where there's an ammo shortage and our law enforcement officers don't have any ammunition. And those are both fair points, but that kind of ammo that they purchased from ATK, hollow point ammunition, as you had explained, it's designed to, tear through human flesh and then expand. It's designed to kill people. This is not the optimal kind of ammo you would buy for target practice. It's more expensive and it's more precise. But even if they're burning through 20 million rounds a month to train their agents, this is still overkill. This is still too much. So best case scenario, this is sort of a waste of taxpayers' money. And worst case scenario is, as you said, they're planning for economic unrest or violent protests or something that requires hollow point ammunition on a wide scale. And they have an open bid right now, DHS, for even more ammunition for 175 million rounds of 223 caliber rifle ammo. We're rapidly militarizing our domestic law enforcement officers, and I think a lot of people are scared. TSA is scary enough. Wait until they all have guns.
Well, I mean,
you can't speak back when they're groping you at the airport.
Since 2001, the federal government has spent $34 billion on militarizing our local police enforcement.
However, several police stations across the country have splurged on some pretty fancy equipment. The Bearcat 3. This is a 9-ton armored vehicle with bullet-resistant windows, gun ports, tear gas dispenser, loudspeaker, and a battering ram on the front bumper. Several departments, including the NYPD, are also using mobile watchtowers, giving cops an eye in the sky. Well, they took it one step further and used a DHS grant to get their own weaponized drone. That's right, this $300,000 Shadowhawk drone made by Vanguard Defense Industries weighs 50 pounds and can be equipped with a beanbag launcher and a taser, giving officers the ability to stop a target from the sky. Does the name Shadowhawk sound familiar? That's because they're the same brand that's used by the military in Afghanistan for counterterrorism operations. So why do cops need a tank or a drone? Well, they don't. But if they can get one, then they figure why not. Call me crazy, but these devices need to be left to the military for war situations, not to use against Americans for domestic purposes. And of course, if you throw the words national security or terrorism in there, everyone acts like it's no big deal.
All right, so here's the deal. I want you guys to think about something. The fact of the matter is that when you consider yourself being an American and think that your government, for some reason, is going to make that title, make you be privileged, then it's only because you're ignorant. You need to look at the history of America. If you can remember what happened, Great Britain came over here at one time and was taxing the shit out of everybody while slavery was going on. But the people that was a part of perpetuating slavery didn't like the idea of being forced into submission themselves. So they were saying to Britain, listen, we're not going to pay you all these high-ass taxes. Then after that war right there, and America got her independence from Britain, slavery grew, and then you had the North and the South who got into conflict with each other because, in my opinion, the South started growing in revenue faster than the North because the North was selling slaves, but the South was working and breeding slaves. So after a while, the North revenue source fell off because the South had no need to buy slaves from them anymore because they had brought men and women, and I shouldn't call them slaves, but that's their name to describe them. But I think chattel property is better, even though they were human beings that were treated like cattle property. So I think chattel property is better than slave. You know why? I don't like a name just covering up the actions of what went along with it. And slavery seemed to do that really good. But the abuse that those people went through under the conditions of the criminal acts of the people who foolishly thought they owned these people and didn't do anything but kidnap them and abuse them. That's all it was. Kidnapping, abuse, and torture. And all other cruel acts. Uncivilized, cruel acts. Get to the point. The North and the South had a fight with each other because the South became very wealthy off of these atrocious deeds I just described to you. And they also started selling slaves themselves, which triggered off a bad problem up north because remember Wall Street started because they needed to put a wall up so they could hide the slave auctions from the business centers of Washington, D.C., where slaves were sold right in the square of government. That's why Wall Street was erected, meaning formed the wall and gave it the name Wall Street because the slaves were put on the other side of the wall so they wouldn't, all that activity wouldn't be visible to the people that were becoming wealthy off of those activities, off of those actions. They wanted to hide it from their view as they sat in their offices and pushed their pens that caused the destruction and decadence of many of the families here in the Americas and as well on the continent of Africa. Back to the point, the North and the South went to war against each other after there was already a war between America